Cops have read it. A lot of people get jumpy and try to act normal around law enforcement. How can you tell genuinely suspicious people from self-conscious idiots acting weird? UK police officer here. There is no single factor, but here are a few things I'd look for. Police aware is an expression we use. Like Op said, most people feel guilty and try to act normal around the police, which normally means pretending we are not there. For instance, you begin to concentrate on, for instance, eating that sandwich to an almost comic extent whilst sneaking the odd look to see what we are doing. Then you have the people who stop what they're doing and watch you intently to see if you're coming for them. These are the people who are police aware. Of course, sometimes they are just tourists hoping to take a sneaky photo of a British copper. Mostly it's people whose appearance or manner doesn't fit in. For example, if you go to a busy taxi rank at rush hour and then just casually mooch about, rather than queuing or leaving, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into an expensive shop wearing tatty clothes and with ingrained dirt on your hands, then that's an odd thing to do. If you walk into a bar, order a drink then leave it on the counter, then that's odd and probably means you're either passing counterfeit money or pickpocketing. None of these things is illegal, but they are all things that are not entirely normal and would attract the eye of an observant police officer. Don't misinterpret these examples as looking scruffy. That's not what I mean at all. It's about not fitting in because of your context, not just a sudden bout of I'm normal from someone who clearly has a reason to be where they are. Visible signs of drug use. Sometimes in the UK you'll hear the term heroin diet, but the same would be true for meth in the US. You can spot addicts from a mile away because they have the same look and behaviors. Without wishing to tar all addicts with the same brush, hard drug addiction and acquisitive crime often go hand in hand, so when I see someone who is clearly an addict, I'm immediately interested in them. Lastly, there's intelligence. A lot of what we do is guided by specific knowledge about an area. In some areas I'll be looking out for teenage kids hanging around bike racks. In others I'll be looking out for drug addicts meeting dealers. In others still I'll be looking for bag thieves amongst drinkers. Anyone who matches the sort of person who I'm on the lookout for who also looks jumpy is going to pique my interest, but normal people less so. Sorry it's such a rambling answer. The truth is there are many factors and it just depends. Edit. If you want to try this yourself, just take a look at this video and try and spot the pickpockets. I won't spoil it by telling you who they are. You won't actually see the theft itself because it's obscured from the camera, but you'll know what they are doing because they stand out so clearly. Just look at who looks out of place. If they are looking at the merchandise they are pretending to inspect, or looking around the room, how they move around the room, that sort of thing. It's pretty much a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Edit 2. Cheers for the gold. Edit 3. Some people asked who the thieves were. Spoiler tags per the sidebar instructions aren't working for me, so as a workaround here is a link to the answer. I got pulled over for speeding on Canada Day on my way up to a tour from Toronto. I did the usual routine of pulling over somewhere safe, taking the registration out, and putting both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. The cop approaches, and I ask if it's okay for me to reach over and turn down the music, which I forgot to do. He starts laughing and says okay. He tells me to put my hands down since I'm making him nervous. I'm like, you're making me nervous. Back in Toronto I don't take any chances and the cops are usually appreciative. But they have never told me to relax. It's best to err on the side of caution with Toronto police. But the out of city cops are usually pretty laid back. We had a good old Canadian laugh, wished each other a happy Canada Day, and then he gave me a ticket for 115 and a 100. Sigh. Edit. I was caught going 125 km/h in a 100 km/h zone. The cop reduced it to 115 km/h. I had a similar thing happen when I was 17. Went through a roadblock, had the cop ask where we were going, to which I said, just out for a drive. He did not like that response and demanded several times where we were going and where we came from. We came from my house. We are going for a drive. When the answer didn't change, he started yelling at me, causing me to panic, which escalated to crying, hyperventilating, and general freak out. He made me pull off to the side, interrogated me for 10 minutes, gave me a ticket, can't remember what for, and then wouldn't let me leave because I wasn't upset. I tried explaining to him I just needed a minute alone to calm down, and he flatly refused to give it to me. Stood beside my car staring at me and aggressively asking questions. At one point, well into him being aggressive off to the side, he asked what my problem was. I made the mistake of saying sometimes police make me nervous. He launched into a rant about how police are here to help and protect us. There's no reason to be scared unless you're doing something wrong. It was faked. When he finally let us go, I dropped my friend off and went home myself. I didn't stop shaking for quite some time. Not a cop, but I'm a Florida native, and I'm usually dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. I was in a flyover state for a concert, and was supposed to pick someone up about 4 hours away in the morning. Instead of getting a hotel for 5 hours, I decided to drive to my destination and sleep in the back of the rental car. Usually when I do this, I roll the windows down and sleep with the car off, but it was in the mid-30s this night. I pulled into a vacant parking lot next to a vacant building outside of town. Turns out I was still in city limits. I tried to turn the running lights off, but wasn't able to. This eventually attracted the attention of the local law enforcement. I woke to a flashlight banging on my window. They, all 9 of them, wanted me out of the car while they tried to figure out what was going on. Being as it was cold, I started to shake. I shared how I thought it was amusing that I was shaking and that it would likely raise suspicion. The cop that was babysitting me at that moment said no, it's cold out. She then let me get into the car and start it again. 9/10 would recommend. Random story, so not long after I got my license I was driving around, and at a stoplight there was a cop behind me. I hadn't done anything wrong. Cops at that point didn't freak me out yet, and I even knew a kid at school who was planning to become one. The light turns green and I go. I notice behind me everyone is behind the cop on all lanes. It weirded me out. Usually there are cars passing me or next to me. People were giving the cop a nice wide berth or at least not wanting to drive ahead of it. It made me feel paranoid and I checked my speed. I was actually going slower than the speed limit. After I figured out everyone was just being paranoid, I sped up to the speed limit and that was that. The cop was driving slower than the speed limit, and I drove off leaving them all behind. I feel like the cop probably thought it was hilarious that his presence was slowing down traffic, cause it wasn't like he was trying to control it. His lights weren't on. Since then I've had plenty of speeding tickets. Plenty. But not on that day. Cops freak me out now too. Every time I see one I go, oh shit. Speed limit? I'm okay. Car functioning right. Yes. Drugs in the car? Wait, I don't do drugs. It's a tense situation. Ex-cop, still licensed, if that matters. You can't always tell. That is why treating everyone as close to the same as possible is important. The average person will change their behavior around a police officer at least a little bit. It can be a weird over-respectful type deal, or they may shut down completely. The average criminal acts nearly the same. However, that is why it's important to be very aware of the person's movements and responses to questions or your own movements. If you ask a person with drugs in the car, "Do you have drugs in the car?" his eyes will very commonly dart towards where he or she is hiding something, even if it is not drugs. That of course does not give me probable cause to tear their car apart looking for stuff. It's just a red flag. A person who is simply nervous and is not really guilty of a crime will most likely just break eye contact and look somewhere, such as out the window, behind you, down at the wheel, etc. Same goes for a person you may simply be suspicious of on the street. Are you carrying any weapons? Will lead to a person carrying a weapon too often. Touch the area where it is, usually repeatedly, or start to look at where they have hidden a weapon. A person who is just nervous probably won't grab their waistband several times after that question. That is just one example, but it shows the importance of communication, being aware of the surroundings and subject, and why asking questions is very important. All because a person who is simply nervous and a criminal who is nervous are almost indistinguishable without some digging. As for people who appear totally 100% calm, well, that in and of itself can be a red flag as well. Maybe he or she is calm because they like police. Maybe they are police in a different area. Maybe they really do simply have nothing to hide and a good understanding of police procedures. Or they are a hardened criminal that has no sense of remorse or anxiety over meeting a cop. You never know unless you start to look deeper. So to anyone who feels like cops hate you or are mean, maybe that sheds a bit of light on things. Great question. I'm a cop in Arizona. It's important to know the cultural and societal norms of your patrol area. A huge amount of folks carry guns here, for example. Your average law-abiding citizen will generally use a holster and not be deceptive about the weapon. Bad guys will not be forthcoming. We have some issues with Mexican drug cartels, and they tend to blend in somewhat, but have guns in unique calibers, such as .38 Super. Since we do have a huge Hispanic community, it helps to know the norms for their behavior, which differ somewhat from the white community. A vast majority of the time we will be dealing with people while investigating specific crimes. There's a huge variety of factors involved in that, but generally speaking you are gonna use 4 of your senses to make educated guesses. Sight, smell, touch, sound. A person whose voice wavers may just be afraid of cops. Combine that with an odor of drugs or a suspicious protrusion on their body, then there could be an issue. While cultural knowledge is important, there are some universal signs of deception, which you would probably recognize. I spent a year in Afghanistan doing police work as well, and those principles held true there too. To a degree it's profiling, which is a dirty word, but a pragmatic principle. And questions, fire away. Not a cop, but was almost arrested in my buddy's backyard. I was with 3 of my friends at a bar and we were all getting pretty drunk and having a good time. My one buddy got too drunk and he says he is heading home, where we are all staying that night, and that he will just leave the door unlocked for us to come in when we get back. Well, he ends up going to his dad's house instead of his mom's house like we thought, and he isn't answering his phone. We are already in his mom's backyard and looking in his window trying to see if he is in his room. His mom wakes up and calls the police, and we still don't know anything is wrong. The cops come and we hear them in the alley, but think it is our buddy or his brother getting home, and we go up to the gate to ask them to let us into the house. A cop jumped over the fence and kneed my buddy in the back and starts screaming at us to get the fuck on the ground. I was terrified and got on the ground, and all of us were so panicked that we started stuttering out, "Please, we know the people who live here. It is our buddy's mother's place," and start saying the full names of everyone who lived there. The cop responded to this by saying, "Bullshit, you guys are going to fucking jail. Nobody lives here, it's an empty house." The cops then ask us if we have any weapons, knives, guns, batons, hand grenades was the exact quote, I believe, haha. At this point we are all still so panicked and stressed. I'm thinking that I'm going to jail and there won't be a chance to explain myself, and my buddies and I are just trying to assure the cop that we have no weapons and that we are good people. We are just sputtering out our summer jobs, saying we aren't criminals and telling the cops we are in university and are good guys. Finally the cops ask for our IDs and I'm so scared of getting tasered or shot for reaching into my pockets I must have announced what I was reaching for about 10 times before actually doing it really slowly. The cops check our IDs and we are still lying on the ground. Then they turn to us and go, "Yeah, you are all going to jail for the night. Nice try." Then they get on the phone and I guess they called my friend's mom saying it was safe to come outside if she wanted to talk to them or see who was trying to break in. Thank God she chose to come outside because she knew us really well and recognized us all from closer up even in the dark. She walks out of the door and my buddy starts shouting, "Ms. XXX, Ms. XXX. It's us section and buddy." And we were saved from jail that night. The weird part was that before that I actually thought that cops had some magical training to be able to tell when people were lying or good or bad. After that night I realized it is just based on the situation and their best guess. Nothing we could have said or did would have changed that we were in someone else's backyard and they had called the cops. It makes sense we were treated like criminals and potentially dangerous criminals too. The cops had no good reason why they should think of us as anything but. In college, riding to a movie theater with 5 dudes in a small car. Our driver rolls through a right on red and a cop pulls us over. My buddy in the middle backseat is a little nervous. I don't know if this factored in, but he is non-white and starts to fidget with his hands a bit. No big deal, right? The cop is approaching the driver window when bam bam bam. There are loud noises against my window. Back right. Second cop is rapping his flashlight against the window, gesturing towards my buddy fidgeting with his hands in his hoodie pocket. What you got there? It's a candle. He pulls out a full-size Yankee candle from his hoodie pocket that none of us knew he had. All that for a candle, son? Keep your hands out of your pockets until we are done. Everyone giggled nervously, and the cop let the driver go with a warning. No faking clue why he had a candle, but he was so nervous simply because he was riding in the car that got pulled over. He was doing absolutely nothing wrong. Cops make people crazy. Some people don't know what to do when they are pulled over, having been pulled over myself. What goes through your head? Shit. I'm gonna be late for work. My wife is gonna be pissed. Then, you start scrambling for your license and registration, if you happen to have it in your car, which you might not. Call me an idiot. Go ahead. You take off your seatbelt for comfort. The radio is still on because you're so flustered. As the cop approaches, he can see your hands moving around. He can hear the music. He can see your body move down to the passenger seat as your whole body fades out of view. This is all innocent to you, because you're just trying to comply and get out of this ticket. If you can talk your way out, buddy, what can the officer expect? That said, my experiences were different from videos I've seen of others being shot at traffic stops. I'm a white male in the suburbs of Chicago. I think we are kidding ourselves if we say that doesn't make a difference. Let's say cops get the training they need. Let's say drivers do everything they know to do. Do drivers know what cops are taught to expect a driver to do? How can drivers know what cops are taught? It's not on the driver's test. Beyond/potential/racism, I think this is a fundamental disconnect that would benefit us all. Always struggled with anxiety in social situations, made meeting girls difficult. At age 26, I decided to try my hand at online dating. Bought a premium account on Cupid.com. Met a girl who was amazing. We chatted online for 3 months before I worked up the nerve to meet her face to face. My family wished me luck as I headed out. On the way up the interstate, there's a sign that says there's an ID stop 1 mile ahead. I think to myself, no big deal, this is my exit, and I pull off onto the exit that is about 100 yards behind the sign. They were clearly expecting bad guys to pull off onto that exit because ahead of me were 14 police cars, several of which were K9 units. I slow to a stop, roll my window down. The officer asks for my ID and where I'm heading. I say, well, I'm actually heading to meet a girl. And he replies, oh really? Yeah. We've been talking on the internet for a few months, and I'm finally going to meet her. The officer smiles and says, I was wondering why you were so shaky when you handed me your ID. Another officer walks over to see what's going on. The first officer says, hey, this guy is about to go on a first date. He's nervous. The second officer jokingly says, if he's nervous, he may be hiding something. The first officer laughs, pats the door frame, hands me back my ID, and says, you're gonna have fun. Good luck. The situation made a great icebreaker upon meeting my online crush. We enjoyed our evening and hit it off. That was 12 years ago, and we've been married for 10 of those. Real cop here. Worked in Philly for 6 years in Kensington and now I'm in the burbs living on Easy Street. When I was in Philly you needed to learn people's ways. You would patrol the area multiple times and you would notice that some people never left. Also you'll noticed that these same people would be out regardless of weather. Anyway, it took a while at first, but with time you start to find who's a dealer and who isn't. Drug dealers were annoying to get in Philly because they had a ton of look puts blocks away. And they never kept the drugs on them. I remember we would drive early Sunday mornings the wrong way to get the jump on people. Stolen cars were a little easier. I probably got about 20 plus stolen vehicles in Philadelphia the last 2 years I was there. People in stolen cars tend to give a OSHT look. Another dead giveaway is when you have a ton of young kids in a car. Seriously, it's a stolen car a ton of times in the hood 2 weeks. Before I left I was working solo, and I saw 4 kids in a Sonata park on the side. By the time I turned around they were on the move. I caught up to the car and they quickly took off. Long story short, it was stolen. Some people were really good at getting guns. They were able to read people's stance and notice that they walked a different manner when someone had a weapon on their waistband. I was never too good at that and only got maybe 1.5 dozen guns while I worked in Philly. Now working in the burbs it's a lot less hectic. I get paid more and literally do about 1/20th the amount of work. To me it seems unfair, but whatever. I still enjoy my job, but if I had to pick where to work I would pick Philly. It feels like real police work. But it is nice in the burbs that I can interact with the community more. Former law enforcement here. I didn't see many answers from actual cops/police, so I'll throw one out there. Your question really gets at the heart of why cops come off like assholes and may seem to overreact sometimes. Because most interactions with police progress quickly from initial contact to the officer having a fairly good idea of what's going on and who's the bad guy and who's not. The real answer is that you don't know the difference at the beginning, so cops are trained and learn to act standoffish and hyper aware in order to protect themselves as well as innocent bystanders. By having this ultra vigilant attitude you have a better chance of staying alive during that 1 in 1,000 interactions where the person you're talking to actually means to do harm instead of just run from you or just comply and act reasonable. The short answer: after a couple years of reading people you start to learn how to pick out the average nervous law-abiding citizen and the person who's hiding something. It's almost always something different, where the person came from, something off about the vehicle they're in, something about how they look or don't look at you, the people they are with, past experiences with the person, how they start driving when they see you. I could go on and on. Cops have to be able to articulate reasonable suspicion and probable cause in the reasons they do what they do, but there are often a dozen reasons that convince you someone is guilty, rather than just another nervous good person. Hope that answers her question at least a little. So funny story that happened to me a couple days ago. Driving my hour commute at 5 in the morning down a highway with speed limit 70. Barely anyone on the road. I'm in no rush, so I'm cruising along at like 72 to 73 in the left lane, and then I look back and suddenly there's a car literally on my ass. Like he was so close that I couldn't see his headlights. And it's not like I drive a big car, just a normal size sedan. Normally I'm not one to let people who do that by me, but hey, I was in a decent enough mood. I'll pull over for him and then just follow along behind him at whatever speed he's going. So I let him pass, and to my surprise, it's a cop. I'm like, okay, that's rude and dangerous and not becoming of a police officer. Whatever. I get back behind him and fiddle with the cruise control so that I'm following him, maybe 5 to 6 car lengths, matching his speed. We are going 85. Continue along like this for 20 to 30 minutes like this. Suddenly he guns it and then turns off all of his lights. My first reaction was, okay, why would he do that? But the second was, okay, crap, I can't see him anymore. Like it's 5:30 in the morning and still pitch black. So I slow down back to 70 or so, because I don't want to run into him, or have him run into a different car, and be part of the collateral. I don't know, it was just really dangerous, I thought. So after a couple minutes, he turns his headlights back on, zooms back up to like 85, and starts riding miles again. Now I'm just royally confused, and I put my turn signal on to move over. Then the flashing lights and pulls me over. I'm pissed cause now I don't know how long he's gonna take and might be late for work. He comes and asks me why I was following him. I'm thinking to myself, like it's a highway, we are going straight. I go, I was just driving behind you. He goes, I had my cruise control at 85. Why are you keeping up with me? I just told him I was driving along with the speed of the car in front of me. Then he's like, I turned my lights off and slowed down to 60, and you slowed down too. Why? First, cause I didn't want to pass the cop. That's just asking for it. But 2, because I couldn't see you, and I didn't want to hit you. What you did was really dangerous. He gets all pissed and runs my sheet and starts giving me a lecture that I have to slow down and all this bullshit. Pissed me off. that he didn't see the hypocrisy. Unless they are on a call or have their lights on, cops have to follow the same laws as everyone else. No ticket, but I was this close to calling the dispatcher and filing a complaint for his speed. TLDR, cop drives 85, I drive 85, pulls me over, yells at me for speeding. I'm a angsty teenage skateboarder. Some friends and I frequent a local parking lot / strip mall that is also next to a gas station just to skate a bit and smoke a cigarette. This happened a few weeks ago, but our group of 10 were chilling, playing some hard bass on our speakers and skating around. I notice a cop at the pumps. He's eyeing us, watching. He sees us passing around a cigarette and he gets in his vehicle and drive into the parking lot. None of us were doing anything wrong, but to simply avoid the situation, we all get up and migrate into the gas station. The cop pulls up to our car. I'm watching him through the glass door. I figure we look incredibly suspicious, so I walk out and try to establish contact. Look normal, even though it's only 4 in the morning. I approach the officer. He's out of his vehicle and inspecting us, and then he spots me, gets in his car, and drives. I wave at him like, hey, come back. I'm here. But to no avail. Can honestly say weirdest run-in with cops ever. Sorry it's not an answer to the posed question, but I supposed it was relevant. Not a cop, but I have had really good interactions while pulled over even though I'm nervous. The nervousness comes from the fact that it feels like I'm being judged for doing something wrong. Even though it is just a simple speeding ticket, it just feels like you are being heavily scrutinized. One of the things that I noticed was that the cops that I interacted with would often end a sentence with a question, even when it was a command. For example, do me a favor and wait right here while I run your info. It will only be a few minutes, okay? Simply by asking, okay makes me a lot less nervous, even if I think I'm going to get the ticket. It isn't a rational thought, it is just pure emotion at that point. My belief is that the cops can sort of tell, based on your reactions to little things in the conversation. Someone who is a threat would still be ultra tense if they were asked if they were okay, whereas someone like me, who is just nervous about being pulled over period, is more or less relieved that the cop isn't going to be mean or a hard ass, even if we get the ticket. Again, my response shouldn't be taken as an actual answer to your question, given that it is all anecdotal information. Another thing that I have noticed is that they will ask you simple questions about what you are up to when they see that you are nervous. A nervous person with something to hide has a much harder time lying, whereas a regular nervous person is a little relieved to be chatting at a more human level. The cop can ask you what you were planning to do, where you were going / coming from, etc. or anything that is otherwise just chit chat, but imagine the bullets a bad guy would be sweating at that point trying to come up with false answers. I have a car that appears to be not street legal, but it is, and have been pulled over a dozen times. Yet, I still get nervous whenever I hear the sirens. It is a physical reaction, even when I think I have done nothing wrong. I think the majority of cops out there understand this phenomenon and want to make it easier, especially for themselves when confronting a pulled over driver. I'm a correctional officer, so it's different than the streets. But, in prison everyone is generally suspicious, but they all haven't necessarily done something recently. And some are more suspicious than others. Offenders that did something do a few things. Sometimes they rat on themselves, so someone else doesn't take the fall for what they did, because otherwise they'll probably get jumped. Sometimes they'll make every effort not to look at you, super obvious. If they've stolen something they'll attempt to hide the object on their opposite side as they pass you, again, super obvious. They think we are idiots. There are the lifelong con artists of course, who think they are real smooth, but generally we know when they are trying to play us. Some officers / staff are more open to being compromised in this way, but ultimately the majority know which offender is known for what. There are the new offenders who don't know how to act yet, just like newcos, and they are the funniest, because they generally act around cops the same way they did on the street, trying to crack jokes nervously or avoiding contact, or yelling obscenities at us. Got pulled over going down a country road. The speed limit had been 35 because the road was curvy, and when it straightened out I assumed it went up to 45. I was wrong. Passed a cruiser going the opposite direction and a split second later saw the speed sign. Of course, he did a U-turn, flipped lights on, etc., and pulled me over. Here's where it gets interesting. My friend and I had been target practicing when it started to rain. We had quickly put all our pistols, rifles, and shotguns in backseat to keep them from getting wet. But it had stopped raining after just a few minutes. Well, officer comes up to me, and I'm wondering if it's my last day on earth. I get my license and concealed carry permit out, hands at 10 and 2. As he approaches, even before he says anything, I ease both hands out the window and say, UHM. I've got a lot of guns in the back seat. He was just noticing that fact for himself and says, I need both of you to keep your hands visible and don't move. He takes my IDs and walks backwards to his cruiser, keeping his eyes on us, and one hand hovering over his own pistol. Yes, faking sir, I ain't moving a faking muscle. My hands are still sticking out of the window, and we're expecting a SWAT team to arrive at any moment. After a few million years and a few gallons of my sweat, the cop comes back and says something like, everything checks out. The hell you doing driving around with all those guns? We explain the target practicing, brief rain, me expecting the speed limit to have increased when it didn't, etc. He then starts chatting with me about how much harder it is to get a CCW in my state than the one we were in, etc. My sphincter was slowly beginning to relax, but bet yours my hands were still visible. Didn't even get a speeding ticket or a written warning, though. Maybe not even a verbal one. But my friend and I are white, so there's that. I was in an not at fault accident a year or so ago and was shaken up at the scene. The girl started lying immediately about what she did, and I sensed it as soon as the cop came back to me from talking with her first. I was incensed. It was late. I had just been in a $20K accident with my car totaled in a busy intersection, and he comes to me suspicious. I stammered a bit out of frustration, and lo and behold, the police report showed me as distracted when I did nothing wrong. I suspect due to me still processing what occurred with the woman's statement resulting in my frustration level going through the roof was enough for him to suspect me of something, although he couldn't say what it was. Luckily the woman ended up admitting it after I stuck with my story and came up with several contradictions regarding the lights sequence and how what she stated happened couldn't have physically happened, and it worked. She said she had a green arrow when making a left through an intersection. She had turned left on a solid green, where you must yield by law to oncoming traffic before entering the intersection. At this particular intersection, there is even a sign that requires an arrow to turn left. Good example regarding the top comment, since this officer made a gut call that was wrong, which could have affected my life/auto insurance rates for the next several years. All on an incorrect gut call. Took about a week. While I was in limbo, I was damned if I was going to make a claim on my insurance. I live in an at-fault state. I forgot to add, even with the witness's statement changing, her company was still playing hardball and required me to remind them of the sign that was posted on the traffic light she ran, stating left on green arrow only, even though failing to yield would result in fault in any case. I was on the phone with the adjuster while he used Google Maps to verify the sign, even though even with a solid green she was breaking the law. Felt like I was in the twilight zone being gaslighted left and right. Not a cop, but I wanted to share my oh shit I'm being pulled over routine. That has always helped me maintain my cool and has, more often than not, gotten me out of some tickets. Once an officer makes it known that I'm being stopped, I take a second before I do anything to avoid making a jerk reaction that may or may not ping on their mental radar. Once I'm collected, this usually takes 2 to 3 seconds. I use my signals to pull over to a safe location. Side note, I work with officers regularly and see them pull people over into our parking lot, and most officers that I've talked to, so this is a personal experience of mine, prefer for vehicles to pull over safely near where they initiate a traffic stop. They don't prefer when people drive unnecessarily out of their way to pull over into a parking lot somewhere. If there's one nearby, so be it. but 9/10 times, officers don't initiate traffic stops in areas where it would be unsafe for them to stop a vehicle. Again, this is my personal experience strictly from those that I've spoken with. This could vary from city to city. Once I've pulled over, I turn my hazard lights on. If it's night, this is when I'll turn my cabin lights on. After activating my appropriate lights, I'll roll all 4 of my vehicle's windows down halfway, but the driver's window all of the way down. Then, I'll turn my vehicle off and place both hands on the steering wheel. By this point in time, I'm calm and collected enough to speak with the officer in any normal tone, volume, and speed, which lends itself to a much smoother traffic stop. As I've said before, this process helps keep me calm and helps to put the officer at ease, which is pretty useful when wanting to avoid a speeding ticket. Has anyone ever demanded to the officer that their superior/lieutenant come to the scene? As in, your demeanor is making me nervous and is not professional. Please have your lieutenant come out here and finish the stop. I'm sure that would piss them off, but damn it, don't take that sheet. There was a safety checkpoint just outside a small town I drove through, where they stop all traffic to check your driver's license and insurance. Whatever. I work in a healthcare related field and had left a healthcare facility. I'm also a germ freak, and when I leave a medical faculty I basically douse myself in hand sanitizer. Hands and arms. Needless to say, my vehicle stank of that smell. Well, at the checkpoint the officer asked where I came from and where I was going. I told him. Then he said, well, there is a strong smell of alcohol coming from your vehicle. I must have given him one hell of a what the fuck look, because when the light bulb went off in my head I showed him my big ass hand sanitizer bottle and told him that I just used a crap load of this, which was damn true. Thankfully he laughed and said that that was exactly what he was smelling and told me to have a nice afternoon. I'm grateful he was friendly and had common sense. Maybe he detected my honesty in my answers and demeanor, I don't know. I would have been pissed otherwise. Asking for a friend was on the other side, but personally when I was a very naughty young man I'd just imagine all the normal things I'd be about to do instead of the copious amounts of drugs I was carrying. Some small things go a long way, like walking my dogs was always a chore, with a pit bull and a rottie, and being heavily tattooed I knew I would be judged/looked at, so I made a point about my dogs being the best behaved around. They walked at my heel. I wasn't dragged. They would sit at the edge of the road before we crossed. They would be friendly with other dogs and come when called. Small things like making my dogs sit when crossing the road went a long way in my neighbor's eyes as making me seem like a more responsible person than I really was, and also contributed to me having no police breaking down my door when many other places in that neighborhood did. I taught my housemates this. It's all about appearances. It's fun to look bad as walking your huge mean dogs down the street straining at their leash, but it leaves a bad impression and the likelihood of a friendly tip-off increases. Well-behaved dogs impress people and implies you're a good/responsible person. I understand it's quite a difficult thing to know if someone is suspicious. Hell, let me use myself as an example. I've always had a deep respect for cops and sometimes try to start some conversation with a cop if they are nearby just chilling or waiting in line. But I also have a bit of a problem that started way into my childhood. I'm a pathological liar. And when I'm talking to people, I get really nervous because I have to make a conscious effort to not start making a lie or a story to make me look good or divert attention away from myself. My pathological lying has even become an automatic defense mechanism where, if I'm not careful or paying attention, if I'm asked a question, I'd automatically spout a lie or say something in my favor. So whenever I start a conversation with a cop, I have to insert a quick explanation somewhere about my lying problem and how my jittery behavior is just me trying to stay focused on the truth. And if I suddenly get all stony-faced and calm, it's likely my mind getting ready to spout a lie that I will hopefully quickly stop in its tracks or correct once it's been said. And in my own studies, even though body language specialists and speech classes teach that a person who is jittery and not looking you in the eye is lying or guilty, I've found it's the more experienced or smarter liars and individuals, especially writers, storytellers, and public speakers, that are always calm, collected, and look a person in the eye. I'm hella nervous around cops. First time I was ever pulled over. Well, my friends and I drove 2 hours out of town for an event. We had 11 people, so we took 3 cars. Well, the leader was a dumbass and pulled out before the other 2 cars could. I was the middle car. Well, I got on the freeway and started panicking because I didn't know where I was supposed to go. So I pull over to the side of the road, start reaching my phone, and boom. Lights right behind me. Full panic attack. I take a few deep breaths so I can talk to him. He comes up to my car while his partner go to my friend's car behind them. This guy, if he was any louder he would have been yelling at me. He kept asking me all these questions as I'm crying and clearly can't talk. My friend tried to tell him, "Officer, she can't talk. I can tell," and he cut him off and told him he was asking me. So what felt like an eternity I told him through tears we were lost. He went on about some stuff, but I zoned back out panicking. The other officer came over and just looked so apologetic. Ever since I'm super close to having a panic attack when I get pulled over. And it's only been twice and both times they were so nice, and I thanked them for that. But even just seeing a cop on the road, even if I'm not driving, nope. I get super tense. Can't do it.